Hi, friends. You may think you know the glittering legends of Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, whose wisdom and allure shaped empires. But have you ever wondered about the hidden whispers of her palace? The secrets I discovered while padding softly through marble halls and sunlit gardens as her devoted cat in those fateful days of 30 BCE? Welcome to the Animal Historian. I invite you to rest, relax, and let this story carry you away. If you enjoy these journeys through history, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight. Share it in the comments below. And tell me which animal story you'd like to hear next. Your ideas inspire the next adventures. My dear listeners, as I curl up in the quiet of this eternal night, my whiskers twitching at the memory of warm sands and distant Nile whispers, let me take you back to the very beginning of my tale. I was born in the bustling heart of Alexandria, that magnificent city where the sea meets the desert, in the year we now call 35 BCE. The world was a symphony of scents and sounds then, a place where the gods still walked among mortals, or so it seemed to my young eyes. Picture it with me, the gentle lapping of waves against the harbor walls, the soft rustle of palm fronds in the evening breeze, and the faint, soothing hum of 1,000 voices blending into one harmonious murmur. It was a time of splendor, yet laced with the subtle tensions of an empire on the edge. And I, a small kitten, entered this world unaware of the grand history I would witness. My mother was a temple cat, descended from the revered lines that honored Bastet, the goddess of protection, joy, and fertility. In ancient Egypt, cats like us were more than mere animals. We were divine emissaries, guardians against evil spirits and vermin alike. I remember the warmth of her side as I nursed in the shadowed alcoves of the Serapeum, that grand temple complex dedicated to Serapis, a fusion of Greek and Egyptian deities that symbolized the blended world of the Ptolemies. The air was thick with the calming aroma of incense, myrrh and frankincense burning slowly in bronze censers, their smoke curling lazily upward like the breath of sleeping gods. The priests, with their shaved heads and linen robes, moved with a rhythmic grace, chanting prayers that echoed softly off the stone walls. The night was quiet, so very quiet, I would think, even then, as the distant bells from the harbor told the hours. Alexandria itself was a marvel, a city founded by Alexander the Great centuries before, now thriving under Cleopatra's rule. Few know this secret of history, while many imagine Egypt as a land of pyramids and pharaohs in the old style. Alexandria was a Hellenistic jewel, with wide boulevards lined by marble columns, libraries overflowing with the scrolls from every corner of the known world, and the great lighthouse, the Pharos, casting its eternal glow across the Mediterranean. It stood over 300 feet tall, its fire mirrored in bronze plates, guiding ships safely to port with a light that could be seen for miles. As a kitten, I scampered along the Heptastadion, the massive mole connecting the island of Pharos to the mainland, feeling the cool spray of the sea on my paws. The water was alive with the scent of salt and fish, a soothing reminder of the vast world beyond. But let me share a lesser-known truth about this era, one that adds depth to our animal history. Cleopatra's Alexandria was not just a seat of power, but a center of intellectual pursuit, home to the Mausoleum, the precursor to modern museums and universities, where scholars debated philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy under royal patronage. It's rarely mentioned that Cleopatra herself was a polymath, fluent in 9 languages, including Egyptian, which none of her Ptolemaic ancestors had bothered to learn. She authored treatises on cosmetics, pharmacology, and even weights and measures, blending Greek intellect with Egyptian mysticism. As I grew, exploring the temple grounds, I overheard whispers among the priests about her experiments in alchemy, seeking elixirs for eternal youth, secrets drawn from ancient papyri that promised to harness the Nile's fertile magic. My early days were filled with simple joys, the kind that lull one into peaceful slumber. I chased shadows in the temple courtyards, where lotus ponds reflected the stars like scattered jewels. The water lilies bloomed with a delicate perfume, mingling with the earthy smell of baked bread from nearby bakeries. Vendors in the agora called out softly, their voices a gentle cadence. Fresh dates, honeyed figs. The rhythm of hooves on cobblestone streets provided a steady, hypnotic beat, like a distant drum inviting rest. I felt the sun's warmth on my back, soaking into my fur as I napped atop warm granite statues of Bastet, her feline form watching over me with serene eyes. Yet, even in this tranquility, there were hints of the storms to come. Alexandria was a melting pot, with Greeks, Egyptians, Jews, and Romans coexisting in a delicate balance. I recall sensing the tension in the air, like the subtle vibration before a thunderstorm, the way the wind shifted, carrying the metallic tang of Roman coins and the foreign spices from distant traders. A historical secret not widely known. In 35 BCE, Cleopatra was navigating complex alliances after the assassination of Julius Caesar, her former lover and father to her son, Caesarion. She had just solidified her bond with Mark Antony, the Roman triumvir, in a union that blended politics and passion. Whispers in the temples spoke of Antony's gifts to her, entire provinces like Cyprus and Phoenicia, strengthening Egypt's borders, but provoking envy in Rome. As a cat, I didn't understand the words, but I felt the unease in the priests' hushed tones, their prayers growing longer into the night. Growing bolder, I ventured beyond the temple into the royal quarter, drawn by the allure of grander scents. The palace district, on the loftiest promontory, was a world of opulence, gardens terraced down to the sea, filled with exotic plants from India and Arabia. Peacocks strutted with iridescent feathers, their calls a soft, echoing melody. Fountains bubbled gently, the waters trickle, a calming ASMR-like sound that could ease any weary soul. Here, I first glimpsed the palace itself, a sprawling complex of white marble and gold accents, its roofs adorned with statues of Isis and Osiris. Little did I know this would become my home, but that peace would not last long. As I matured, my coat gleaming like polished obsidian, I learned the ways of survival in this vibrant city. Cats were sacred, protected by law. Harming one could mean death, a decree from the time of the pharaohs. This reverence stemmed from Bastet, whose festivals filled the streets with music and dance, the air alive with the scent of roasted meats and floral garlands. a quirky observation from my feline perspective. Humans seemed so hurried, their arguments echoing loudly through the markets, yet they paused to offer me scraps of fish or a gentle stroke, murmuring blessings. Why do they rush so? I pondered as I lounged in the shade of obelisks brought from Heliopolis, their hieroglyphs telling tales of ancient kings. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon in a blaze of orange and pink, painting the harbor in soft hues, I followed a procession toward the palace. Priests carried offerings, baskets of pomegranates and amphorae of wine, their footsteps a rhythmic patter on the stone paths. The air grew richer with perfumes, rose attar and cinnamon, scents that Cleopatra favored, drawn from her own recipes. Cleopatra's cosmetics were legendary. She used kohl made from galena to line her eyes, not just for beauty, but to ward off infections, and bathed in ass's milk infused with honey and aloe for skin that glowed like the moon. These were not mere vanities, but calculated tools of statecraft, enhancing her aura as the living Isis. Slipping through the gates unnoticed, I entered the outer courts, where slaves moved with quiet efficiency, polishing floors that reflected the torchlight like still water. The palace was a labyrinth of halls and chambers, each more lavish than the last. Mosaics depicted scenes from mythology, Dionysus reveling, or Isis nursing Horus. The sounds were muffled, soothing, the distant pluck of lyres, the soft chatter of courtiers. I hid in alcoves, watching eunuchs guard the inner sanctums, their voices low and reverent. But my true entry into Cleopatra's world came unexpectedly. One dawn, as mist rose from the Nile, I found myself in the royal gardens, drawn by the scent of blooming jasmine. There, amid the dew-kissed flowers, I first saw her, Cleopatra, seated on a throne of ebony and ivory, surrounded by attendants. Her gown shimmered like the river at sunrise, embroidered with golden threads. She spoke in Egyptian to a scribe, her voice a melodic whisper that commanded without raising. A lesser-known fact, unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra embraced Egyptian culture fully, participating in rituals at Memphis and Thebes, presenting herself as the reincarnation of Isis to legitimize her rule. As I approached cautiously, her eyes, lined with that famous kohl, met mine. "Little guardian," she murmured, extending a hand adorned with rings of lapis and gold. In that moment, I became hers, a symbol of Bastet's favor in her court. The palace life enveloped me like a warm blanket. I roamed freely from the kitchens where spices from Punt filled the air, cardamom and saffron, to the libraries stacked with papyrus scrolls. Cleopatra's personal library rivaled the great Mausoleum. She studied there late into the night by the light of oil lamps that cast flickering shadows. I curled at her feet, feeling the vibration of her quill on parchment. Secrets unfolded. She experimented with poisons, testing them on condemned prisoners to perfect painless deaths, a grim but practical knowledge in a world of intrigue. Daily routines were a ballet of calm precision. Mornings began with ablutions, attendants pouring scented water over her in alabaster basins. Breakfasts of figs, cheese, and barley bread shared with her children, Caesarion, the young heir, and the twins with Antony, Alexander Helios, and Cleopatra Selene. I watched them play, their laughter a soft echo in the halls. Afternoons brought audiences where diplomats bowed low, offering tributes. Evenings were for banquets, with music from harps and flutes, the air heavy with wine and roasted fowl. Yet beneath this serenity, currents stirred. News from Rome arrived via swift messengers, speaking of Octavian's rising power. Antony was away, consolidating territories, but his letters, sealed with wax impressions of eagles, brought smiles to her face. A historical secret. In 34 BCE, the donations of Alexandria ceremony saw Antony declare Cleopatra and her children rulers of vast lands, an act that inflamed Roman senators, viewing it as a betrayal. I felt the shift, like a change in the wind, as guards patrolled more vigilantly. As I stretch my paws in the stillness of this eternal night, my memories drift back to those golden days in Cleopatra's palace, where every shadow held a story and every scent carried a secret. The year was still 35 BCE, and I was no longer a mere kitten scampering through Alexandria's temple courtyards. I had become a fixture in the royal household, a sleek cat named Bastet, after the goddess herself, a name Cleopatra bestowed upon me with a smile that felt like sunlight. The palace was my world now, a labyrinth of marble and gold, where the air was thick with the soothing scents of lotus and myrrh, and the soft clink of goblets and the murmur of voices wove a tapestry of calm. Let me take you deeper into the heart of Cleopatra's court, where I witnessed the intricate dance of power and beauty and learned secrets few humans ever knew. Life in the palace was a rhythm of its own, a gentle pulse, like the Nile's endless flow. Each morning, I woke to the sound of the water splashing in fountains, a delicate ASMR-like trickle that could lull any soul to peace. The royal gardens, terraced down to the sea, were my playground. I padded along paths lined with tamarisk and acacia, their leaves rustling softly in the breeze, carrying the faint salt of the Mediterranean. Peacocks wandered here, their feathers catching the dawn's light, their calls a low, melodic hum that blended with the distant songs of fishermen hauling their nets. The air was alive with scents, jasmine blooming under starlight, the earthy tang of clay pots filled with herbs, and the sweet perfume of Cleopatra's own rosewater, which lingered wherever she walked. The morning was quiet, so very quiet, I thought, as I leapt onto a low wall to bask in the sun's warmth, my fur soaking up its gentle heat. Cleopatra's daily life was a spectacle of calculated grace, and I, with my keen feline senses, observed it all. She rose early, her attendants moving with the precision of a sacred ritual. They bathed her in water infused with aloe and honey, the steam rising in soft curls that smelled of summer blooms. A lesser-known historical secret was that Cleopatra's beauty regimen was as much science as art. She used a paste of crushed pearls dissolved in vinegar to brighten her skin, a recipe rooted in Egyptian alchemy and documented in scrolls now lost to time. This wasn't mere vanity. Her radiant appearance was a tool of statecraft, reinforcing her divine image as Isis incarnate. I watched her apply kohl with a steady hand, the black powder mixed with crocodile dung. A curious but effective antibacterial agent, a secret known only to her closest maids. My days were spent weaving through the palace's many chambers, each a new sensory delight. The throne room, with its alabaster columns and golden inlays, echoed with the soft tread of bare feet on polished floors. Mosaics depicted the myths of Osiris and Horus, their colors vibrant under the flickering light. I curled up on silk cushions, listening to the low hum of scribes, reading petitions or poets, reciting verses in Greek and Egyptian. The palace was a crossroads of cultures, where Greek philosophers debated with Egyptian priests, and Jewish scholars from the city's thriving community brought scrolls of their own. A quirky observation from my feline perspective. Humans loved to argue, their voices rising in passion over ideas I couldn't grasp. Yet they'd pause to offer me a scrap of roasted quail or a gentle scratch behind my ears. Why do they fuss so? I wondered, as I napped in the cool shade of a porphyry statue. One of my favorite haunts was the Royal Library, a sanctuary of knowledge rivaling the Great Mausoleum. Here, Cleopatra spent hours poring over scrolls, her fingers tracing lines of Demotic and Greek, a historical secret not widely known. She was not just a reader, but a contributor to this intellectual hub. She funded translations of Egyptian medical texts into Greek, preserving ancient remedies for ailments like fever and snake bites. I recall the scent of papyrus, dry and faintly sweet, mingling with the wax of seals and the ink of freshly written scrolls. Once, as I leapt onto a table, I knocked over a clay tablet inscribed with alchemical symbols. Notes on Cleopatra's experiments with mercury and sulfur, seeking elixirs that could preserve life or mimic gold. The scribe who retrieved it muttered about her divine curiosity, a phrase that stuck with me as I watched her study late into the night, her lamp casting soft shadows that danced like spirits. The palace wasn't just a place of beauty and intellect. It was a fortress of diplomacy. Messengers arrived daily, their sandals slapping against stone floors, bringing news from distant lands. I sensed the tension in their hurried steps, the faint metallic tang of their sweat. In 35 BCE, Cleopatra was strengthening her alliance with Mark Antony, who was then in Syria, commanding Roman legions. A secret few historians note, Antony sent her rare botanical specimens from the Levant, myrrh trees, and balsam plants, intended for her gardens, but also for her pharmacological experiments. These gifts arrived in cedar crates, their resinous scent filling the air as slaves unpacked them. I rubbed against the rough wood, savoring the exotic aroma, while overhearing courtiers whisper about Rome's growing unease. Octavian, Antony's rival, was spreading rumors in the Senate, calling Cleopatra a seductress bent on enslaving Rome. The truth, as I saw it, was more complex. She was a queen protecting her kingdom, using every tool, her wit, her charm, her wealth, to secure Egypt's future. The children of the palace brought a softer rhythm to my days. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, was a serious boy of 10, his eyes always scanning scrolls or watching his mother with quiet awe. The twins, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene, were younger, their laughter a bright melody as they chased each other through the gardens. I joined their games, darting after ribbons they trailed or pouncing on balls of woven reed. Their nursemaids spoke of their divine titles: Helios, the sun; Selene, the moon, bestowed by Antony in a grand ceremony that I'd soon witness. A calming motif I recall, the twins' giggles blending with the rustle of palm fronds, a sound that could soothe any restless heart. The day was peaceful, so very peaceful, I thought, as I napped beside them, the sun warming my fur. Beneath this serenity, I sensed undercurrents of change. The palace guards, clad in bronze and linen, patrolled with sharper eyes, their spears glinting in the torchlight. Whispers reached my ears, talk of Roman legions, massing in the east, of Octavian's propaganda painting Antony as a traitor. A historical secret from this time, Cleopatra was quietly fortifying Alexandria's defenses, commissioning new warships in the harbor, and stockpiling grain in granaries hidden beneath the city. These preparations were discreet, known only to her inner circle, but I noticed the extra carts rolling in under moonlight, their wheels creaking softly, laden with supplies, a new scent, tar and cedar from the shipyards, hinting at preparations for a storm I couldn't yet see. My role as Cleopatra's cat grew more intimate. She often carried me in her arms during audiences, my purring a quiet counterpoint to the weighty discussions. I felt the tension in her grip, the way her fingers lingered on my fur as she listened to reports of grain yields or troop movements. Once, as she met with an emissary from Judea, I caught the scent of frankincense on his robes, a reminder of the vast trade networks Egypt controlled. Another secret, Cleopatra's wealth came not just from the Nile's fertility, but from her monopoly on papyrus exports, a trade she guarded fiercely, ensuring every scroll in Rome bore her mark. Her economic savvy kept Egypt strong, even as Rome's shadow loomed. Evenings in the palace were a symphony of calm. Banquets unfolded in halls lit by alabaster lamps, their light soft as moonlight. Musicians played harps and sistrums, their notes blending with the clink of gold cups and the murmur of laughter. I lounged on cushions, nibbling at morsels of honeyed bread or fish left by careless guests. Cleopatra presided over these gatherings with a quiet authority, her voice weaving stories of Egypt's past to charm foreign dignitaries. I noticed how she adjusted her tone: Greek for philosophers, Egyptian for priests, Latin for Romans, each word chosen to bind her guests to her cause. Her charisma was a gentle spell, as soothing as the Nile's current. But that peace would not last long. I began to notice changes, subtle at first, like the shift in the wind before a sandstorm. Messengers arrived more frequently, their faces drawn, their scrolls sealed with urgency. The palace's rhythm faltered, like a heart skipping a beat. I felt it in the quickened steps of the guards, the hushed tones of the scribes, the way Cleopatra's eyes lingered on the horizon, searching the sea for Antony's sails. Something was stirring, something vast and unstoppable, and I, a small cat in a grand world, was poised to witness it all. But greater secrets await, for the palace was about to open its heart to me, and I would see the true weight of Cleopatra's crown. As the stars wheel overhead in this timeless night, there light a soft veil over my recollections. I invite you to journey further with me into the opulent heart of Cleopatra's world. The year had turned to 34 BCE, and the palace in Alexandria hummed with a new energy, like the subtle vibration of bees in a blooming orchard. I, Bas the cat, had grown accustomed to the palace's rhythms, my paws tracing familiar paths through sun-dappled corridors and shadowed alcoves. Yet change was in the air, carried on the sea winds that whispered through the open colonnades, bringing sense of distant lands and the promise of alliance. Let this animal history envelop you with its gentle waves of sound and scent as I reveal the arrival of Mark Antony and the grand spectacles that followed, secrets woven into the fabric of Egypt's fading glory. The palace stirred with anticipation as word spread of Antony's return from his campaigns in the east. Messengers had come and gone like shadows, their horses' hooves clattering softly on the stone quays. But now, the horizon held sails, Roman triremes cutting through the azure Mediterranean, their oars dipping in rhythmic unison. I perched on a balcony overlooking the harbor, feeling the warm breeze ruffle my fur, carrying the tang of salt and tar. The Pharaoh's lighthouse beamed its guiding light, a steady pulse that mirrored the heartbeat of the city. The sea was calm, I mused, as the ships docked, their decks alive with a murmur of soldiers and the clink of armor. Antony stepped ashore, a towering figure in Roman garb edged with Egyptian motifs, his face weathered by battles, but lit with a smile for Cleopatra alone. Their reunion was a moment of quiet intensity, observed from my hidden vantage in the royal receiving hall. Cleopatra awaited him on a throne of carved ivory, her gown flowing like the Nile in flood, adorned with emeralds that caught the torchlight. I slunk closer, curling at her feet, feeling the vibration of her pulse quicken as he approached. They embraced not with the passion of lovers in tales, but with the measured grace of partners in power, his hand on her shoulder, her whisper in his ear. A historical secret few know. Antony and Cleopatra's union was as much a strategic merger as a romance. She had borne him twins the year before, and now they solidified their bond through shared rituals, including a private ceremony invoking Isis and Dionysus, blending Egyptian and Greek gods to legitimize their rule. I witnessed this in a secluded temple within the palace, where incense burned low and slow, its smoke curling in soothing patterns. The air heavy with sandalwood and amber. With Antony's presence, the palace transformed into a hive of activity, yet always with that underlying calm that defined Cleopatra's court. Banquets grew more lavish, halls filled with the soft strumming of lutes and the aroma of spiced meats, lamb roasted with cumin and garlic, served on platters of gold. I roamed among the guests, nobles from Armenia and Syria paying homage, their robes scented with exotic oils. Antony regaled them with tales of his victories over the Parthians, his voice a deep rumble that echoed gently off the walls. From my perspective, lounging on silk pillows, I noted how he deferred to Cleopatra, letting her steer conversations toward alliances. A quirky, feline observation. Humans like Antony so bold in battle, softened in her presence, their arguments fading into laughter, as if her gaze were a balm for weary souls. One of the grand events of that year was the donations of Alexandria, a ceremony that reshaped empires and sowed seeds of discord. Held in the grand gymnasium, a vast space with marble floors and statues of heroes, it drew crowds from across the city. I followed the procession, slipping through legs clad in fine linen, the air alive with the scent of floral garlands and burning resins. Cleopatra and Antony sat enthroned as gods, she as Isis, he as Dionysus, their children arrayed beside them. Caesarion was proclaimed King of Kings, heir to Egypt and Rome's eastern provinces. The twins received titles over Armenia, Media, and beyond. The crowd's cheers were a wave of sound, muffled and rhythmic, like distant thunder. A lesser-known historical secret, this event wasn't just pageantry. Cleopatra distributed vast tracts of land, including timber-rich Cilicia and bomb-producing Judea, to fund her navy and secure resources. Documents from the time, etched on bronze tablets now buried in archives, reveal she extracted oaths of loyalty, sealed with her cartouche, ensuring these donations bound the recipients to Egypt's fate. In the aftermath, the palace buzzed with preparations, scribes working by lamplight to draft treaties, their quills scratching softly on papyrus. I curled on Cleopatra's lap during these sessions, feeling the warmth of her skin through her sheer robes, her fingers absently stroking my ears. She and Antony plotted in low voices, maps unrolled before them, showing the breadth of their domains, from the Euphrates to the Atlantic. Another secret, drawn from whispers among the eunuchs, Cleopatra maintained a network of spies, women disguised as merchants who traveled the trade routes, reporting on Octavian's moves in Rome. These agents used coded messages hidden in jewelry or fabrics, a system she perfected from Ptolemaic traditions, ensuring her intelligence flowed like the Nile's hidden currents. Daily life intertwined with these grand schemes in soothing patterns. Mornings brought walks in the gardens, where Antony and Cleopatra strolled arm in arm, discussing philosophy, she favoring Plato, he Aristotle, their voices a gentle cadence blending with birdsong. I trailed behind, pouncing on fallen petals, the grass cool under my paws. The twins played nearby, their games involving miniature chariots pulled by geese, laughter bubbling like a spring. Afternoons were for audiences, where petitioners bowed low, offering tributes of ivory and spices. I sensed Antony's restlessness, his Roman blood calling for action, yet he lingered, enchanted by Egypt's luxuries. The baths, scented with lavender oil, the libraries where he debated with scholars. Yet even in this splendor, omens whispered. Birds flocked unusually over the harbor, their cries a soft, eerie chorus. A comet streaked the sky one night, interpreted by priests as a sign of change. Cleopatra consulted oracles in the Serapeum, offerings of milk and honey poured before statues, the air thick with prophetic smoke. A historical ASMR detail. She used dream incubation, sleeping in temples to receive visions from Isis, a practice rooted in ancient Egyptian medicine, where herbs like mandrake induced vivid, guiding dreams. I accompanied her once, napping at the altar's base, the stone cool and reassuring, the chants of priests a lullaby that eased us both into slumber. The palace's underbelly held its own quiet dramas. Slaves moved like ghosts through service corridors, their footsteps muffled, carrying trays of fruits and wines. I explored these hidden paths, discovering storerooms filled with amphorae of olive oil from Crete and wines from Gaul, trades bolstered by Antony's conquests. A secret not often told: Cleopatra's economy thrived on monopolies, including the production of purple dye from murex snails, a process so guarded that workers were sworn to secrecy under pain of death. The vats in coastal workshops bubbled with a pungent scent, yielding hues reserved for royal garments, symbolizing her unchallenged power. As evenings fell, the court gathered for entertainments, dancers swirling in veils of silk, their bells tinkling softly, acrobats tumbling with graceful ease. Antony and Cleopatra watched from divans, sharing goblets of spiced wine, their conversation turning to the future. I felt the weight of their ambitions, like a gathering cloud, yet the moments were tender, her head on his shoulder, his hand in hers. The night air cooled, stars emerging one by one, a canopy of peace. But that harmony would not last long. Rumors from Rome began to seep in, carried by traders and envoys, speaking of Octavian's fury at the donations, his speeches decrying Antony as bewitched. The winds shifted, bringing a chill from the north, and I sensed the palace bracing, like a cat arching before a storm. Whispers of war echoed faintly, plans laid in secret councils that I, with my silent pause, would soon overhear. Drift now, dear listeners, on the currents of these memories, the scent of incense fading, the murmur of the sea retreating, the quiet purring of history's untold tales. The night deepens, so very deep. Yet more revelations await, for the palace's secrets were only beginning to unfold, and I was there, watching as empires teetered on the edge. In the hush of this everlasting twilight, where memories flicker like distant stars over the Nile, I draw you closer to the turning tides of my story. The sands of time had shifted to 33 BCE, and the palace in Alexandria, once a haven of harmonious splendor, began to echo with the subtle strains of discord. I, Bast, the queen's faithful cat, felt it in the air, a faint, unsettling shift, like the first tremor of an earthquake far beneath the earth. The sense grew sharper, the acrid hint of forge smoke from the shipyards, the metallic tang of polished bronze from armories awakening after years of quiet. Yet, amid this, the palace retained its soothing rhythms, the fountain's gentle babble, and the rustle of papyrus scrolls, providing a veil of calm over the gathering storm. Join me in this historical ASMR story as I recount the whispers of war and the secrets of strategy that unfolded in those pivotal months, seen through my watchful eyes. The year began with Antony, still by Cleopatra's side, their alliance, a beacon that illuminated the eastern Mediterranean. But Rome's shadow lengthened, carried on swift ships bearing letters from the west. I recall padding through the council chambers, where maps of parchment lay unfurled like ancient skins, marked with ink lines, tracing borders and seas. Antony paced with measured steps, his boots thudding softly on the mosaic floors, while Cleopatra sat poised, her voice a steady murmur guiding the discussions. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax from sealed missives and the faint spice of cinnamon from her tea, a brew she favored for clarity of mind. The councils were quiet, so very quiet, I thought, as I leapt onto a low stool to observe, my tail curling in contentment despite the undercurrents. A lesser-known historical secret from this time, drawn from the annals of forgotten scribes, was Cleopatra's role in revitalizing Egypt's naval power. While many know of her wealth, few realize she personally oversaw the construction of a fleet using timbers from the cedar forests of Cyprus, a territory gifted by Antony. These ships, built in secret harbors along the Nile Delta, incorporated innovative designs blending Greek quinkorimes with Egyptian barges, vessels wide enough to carry catapults, yet swift under oar. I ventured to the docks once, slipping past guards under the cover of dusk, the air alive with the rhythmic hammering of mallets and the resinous aroma of fresh-cut wood. Slaves whispered of the queen's inspections, how she tested the hull's strength with her own hand, ensuring each plank could withstand the tempests of war. This fleet, numbering over 200, was her hidden ace, funded by tolls on the Red Sea trade routes she controlled, routes that brought ivory and spices from Punt, in quantities that rivaled Rome's imports. As tensions mounted, Antony's letters to Rome grew terse, his quill scratching late into the night. I curled at his feet, feeling the warmth of the lamp's flame on my fur, the light casting long shadows that danced like omens on the walls. Octavian, now consolidating power in the West, began a campaign of whispers, propaganda scrolls distributed in the Forum, painting Antony as a puppet of the Egyptian sorceress. A quirky observation from my feline view. Humans clung to such tales, their arguments flaring like brief sparks, yet Antony laughed them off in private, sharing jests with Cleopatra over wine. But the truth was more nuanced. Antony sought to balance his Roman duties with his Eastern ambitions, sending envoys to negotiate peace while fortifying borders. A pivotal event unfolded: Antony's formal divorce from Octavia, Octavian's sister, a union that had once bridged their rivalry. This act, sealed in the palace's legal chambers, amid the scent of burning sealing wax and the soft chant of notaries, severed the last personal tie between the triumvirs. Few know this obscure detail. The divorce papers included clauses redistributing properties in Italy, but Cleopatra influenced the wording to emphasize Antony's commitment to their children, positioning them as heirs to a new Hellenistic empire. I was there, hidden in an alcove, as the document was read aloud, the words hanging in the air like incense smoke. The palace reacted with subdued relief. Courtiers murmured blessings to Isis, their voices a gentle chorus that blended with the evening call to prayer from the city's minarets. With this break, the palace's daily life adapted to a new vigilance. Mornings brought military drills in the outer courts, where Egyptian archers practiced with bows of horn and sinew, their arrows whistling softly through the air. I watched from atop a granite sphinx, the stone warm under the sun, the scent of oiled leather and sweat mingling with blooming oleanders. Cleopatra joined these sessions, clad in a linen tunic, demonstrating her skill with a dagger, a remnant of her training in the Ptolemaic arts of self-defense. Another historical secret: she maintained a personal guard of Macedonian women, trained in the Amazonian style, a unit whose existence was concealed from Roman spies. These warriors, disguised as attendants, practiced in hidden gymnasia, their laughter and clashes a muffled symphony that I alone could freely observe. The children, too, felt the change, though shielded in their innocence. Caesarion, now growing into a youth, studied tactics with tutors, poring over scrolls of Alexander's campaigns. The twins, Helios and Selene, played games mimicking battles, their wooden swords clacking gently on the terrace floors. I joined them, batting at their toys, the grass tickling my paws as the sea breeze carried the soothing lap of waves. Evenings brought family gatherings, where stories of Egypt's pharaonic past were told by firelight, the flames crackling softly, casting a golden glow that warded off the encroaching night. Yet, the propaganda war escalated, reaching even our shores. Octavian's agents smuggled pamphlets into Alexandria's markets, decrying Cleopatra as a foreign temptress. In response, she and Antony minted coins bearing their profiles, his as Dionysus, hers as Isis, a subtle assertion of divine rule, a calming motif I cherish. The clink of these coins in merchants' pouches, a rhythmic sound like rain on leaves, symbolizing their united front. But a deeper secret emerged in the summer. Antony deposited his will in the Temple of Vesta in Rome, a document that bequeathed his eastern conquests to Cleopatra's children and requested burial beside her in Alexandria. Octavian, through treachery, seized and read it aloud in the Senate, twisting it to inflame Roman pride, a betrayal that few anticipated, turning public opinion irrevocably against Antony. As autumn approached, preparations intensified. Granaries swelled with wheat from the Nile's harvest, the air heavy with the earthy scent of stored grain. Cleopatra's alchemical pursuits took a darker turn. She experimented with poisons in secluded labs, testing venoms from asps and scorpions on condemned prisoners to find a merciful end should defeat come. I slunk into these chambers once, the air thick with acrid fumes and the low hum of her incantations, her hands steady as she noted results in coded hieroglyphs. This knowledge, rooted in Egyptian medical papyri, was a guarded secret, ensuring she controlled her fate. The palace's entertainments persisted, a balm against anxiety. Banquets featured dancers from Persia, their silks swirling in soft eddies, bells tinkling like distant chimes. Antony and Cleopatra hosted symposia, discussing philosophy under starlit skies, their voices weaving with the strum of lyres. I lounged on their divan, purring in rhythm with the music, the warmth of their closeness, a reminder of fragile peace. But that fragile peace would not last long. By winter's approach, Antony and Cleopatra departed for Greece, establishing headquarters in Patrai, leaving Alexandria's palaces echoing with absence. I remained behind at first, sensing the void, but soon followed in the queen's entourage, drawn by loyalty. Whispers of mobilization filled the air, fleets gathering, armies marching, the prelude to a confrontation that would reshape the world. The night is profound, so very profound. Still, deeper intrigues beckon, for the seas of fate were churning, and I was sailing into their heart. As the veil of night deepens around us, like the gentle fold of a linen shroud over ancient stones, I beckon you onward through the corridors of my past. The calendar had whispered into 32 BCE, a year when the winds of fate howled across the seas, carrying the clamor of impending conflict from Rome to our eastern shores. I, Bast, the guardian of Cleopatra's secrets, found myself aboard a royal barge slicing through the waves toward Greece, the palace of Alexandria fading like a dream behind us. The air aboard ship was alive with the soothing creak of timbers and the rhythmic splash of oars, scents of salt and pine, resin mingling in a hypnotic brew. Beneath this nautical lullaby, the world teetered on the brink of a war, and I witnessed the maneuvers of empires from my perch on Cleopatra's lap. Our journey to Greece was no hasty flight, but a calculated relocation, positioning Antony and Cleopatra at the heart of their allied territories. We sailed from Alexandria's harbor under a canopy of stars, the Pharos' light winking farewell, as our fleet, dozens of gilded vessels, cut through the Mediterranean's calm expanse. I roamed the deck, paws gripping the smooth wood, the sea spray misting my whiskers in a refreshing veil. The queen's barge, the Thalamigos, was a floating palace, silken awnings fluttering softly, incense burners releasing curls of frankincense that soothed the crew's nerves. The voyage was serene, so very serene, I reflected as I napped in coils of rope, the gentle rock of waves, a mother's lullaby. Antony stood at the prow, his gaze fixed westward, while Cleopatra consulted charts by lamplight, her voice a murmur blending with the wind's sigh. Upon arriving in Patrai, a bustling port on the Gulf of Corinth, we established winter quarters. The town buzzed with activity, its streets echoing with the soft tramp of soldiers' sandals and the clatter of supply wagons. I explored the new surroundings, slipping through olive groves, where the air carried the earthy scent of ripening fruit and the faint smoke of campfires. Antony's legions, mingled with Egyptian and allied troops from client kings, set up encampments that stretched like a vast tapestry over the hills, a historical secret seldom revealed. Cleopatra funded much of this mobilization through her control of the incense trade from Arabia Felix, a monopoly that generated revenues rivaling Rome's annual tribute. Caravans from Petra delivered myrrh and balsam in sealed jars, their aromatic essence used not just for rituals, but as currency to pay mercenaries, a network she had expanded quietly over years. The declaration of war came not with thunder, but with calculated words. In Rome, Octavian had read Antony's will aloud, twisting its contents to portray him as a traitor, besotted by Egyptian luxuries. In response, from our Greek base, Antony and Cleopatra issued proclamations asserting their divine rights. I was present in the command tent, curled on a cushion amid maps and wax tablets. As scribes drafted these documents, the air was thick with the scent of melting wax seals and the low hum of debate. A lesser-known detail from this era, Cleopatra composed a personal manifesto in multiple languages distributed via couriers to allied rulers, invoking her descent from Ptolemy and Alexander to rally Hellenistic support. This text, fragments of which survive in obscure papyri, emphasized her role as protector of the East against Roman aggression, a narrative that swayed kings like Herod of Judea to send tentative aid. As winter thawed into spring, preparations intensified in a rhythm of disciplined calm. Drills unfolded on the plains, where phalanxes marched in unison, their shields clashing softly like distant cymbals. I watched from atop a supply crate, the sun warming my back, the grass whispering underfoot. Antony trained with his men, his sword swinging in arcs that caught the light, while Cleopatra oversaw logistics from a pavilion shaded by canvas. She inspected grain stores, vast silos filled with wheat from Egyptian fields, ensuring rations for 30,000 troops. Another historical secret, she implemented a system of coded signals using mirrors and flags drawn from Ptolemaic naval traditions to coordinate fleet movements across the Ionian Sea. These heliographs, polished bronze discs flashing in the sun, allowed silent communication that baffled Roman scouts, a technique honed in Alexandria's observatories. Alliances were forged and tested in quiet councils. Emissaries from Asia Minor and Syria arrived, their robes scented with clove and sandalwood, bearing oaths of fealty. I slunk among them, sensing the tension in their bowed heads. King Archelaus of Cappadocia pledged cavalry, his horsemen's mounts whinnying softly in the stables. A quirky observation from my cat's eye. Humans sealed pacts with handshakes and wine, their laughter masking underlying doubts. Yet they offered me tidbits of cheese as if seeking my approval. Cleopatra charmed them with gifts, jewels and scrolls, her voice a soothing cadence that wove loyalty like a spell. Yet cracks appeared in this united front. Some allies wavered, swayed by Octavian's promises of amnesty. In a private moment, I overheard Antony and Cleopatra in their quarters, the tent flaps rustling gently in the breeze. She paced with graceful steps, arguing for a defensive strategy, while he advocated offense. The air held the faint perfume of her lotus oil, a calming anchor amid discord, a secret not widely chronicled. Cleopatra maintained a shadow diplomacy, sending female agents, disguised as traders, to infiltrate Roman camps, gathering intelligence on troop strengths. These spies used carrier pigeons, trained in Alexandria, birds whose coos blended with the dawn chorus, carrying messages in tiny scrolls tied to their legs. Summer brought naval maneuvers in the Ambracian Gulf, where our fleet practiced formations. I accompanied Cleopatra on inspection voyages, the deck swaying beneath me. The oars dip a rhythmic pulse. The ships, quinqueremes with bronze rams, gleamed under the sun, sails billowing like clouds. The scent of pitch and salt water was invigorating yet soothing, lulling sailors to rest in hammocks below. Cleopatra equipped her vessels with fire-resistant coatings made from alum and vinegar, a formula from her alchemical studies, protecting against Greek fire, a weapon she feared from Octavian's arsenal. On land, the army grew, incorporating levies from Thrace and Pontus. Tents dotted the landscape like mushrooms after rain, campfires flickering softly at dusk. Evenings were for strategy sessions, where generals gathered around braziers, their voices low over cups of mulled wine. I curled by the fire's warmth, ears twitching at mentions of Octavian's fleet under Agrippa, probing our defenses, a calming motif, the crackle of flames, the murmur of plans, the quiet assurance of Cleopatra's presence, her hand occasionally stroking my fur for comfort. Internal strains emerged as the year waned. Antony's Roman officers grumbled, resenting Cleopatra's influence, their whispers like leaves in the wind. She countered with displays of unity, joint sacrifices to Hercules and Isis, incense rising in spirals that perfumed the air. Another obscure secret, she commissioned propaganda coins minted in Ephesus, depicting her and Antony as liberators, with inscriptions in Greek promoting their cause. These drachmas circulated among troops, their clink a subtle reminder of shared destiny. As autumn leaves turned, scouts reported Octavian's advance, his legions crossing to Greece. The air grew crisp, carrying the scent of impending rain. Our forces mobilized, marching to key positions, the ground vibrating softly under thousands of feet. But that mobilization would not last unchallenged. Whispers of betrayal seeped in, allies defecting under Octavian's sway, and I sensed the tide turning, like a cat feeling the earth shift before a quake. The stage was set for confrontation, and I, a silent witness, braced for the clash. The darkness envelops, so very enveloping. Yet the heart of the storm awaits, for secrets of battle were on the horizon, and I was there to see them unfurl. In the soft embrace of this boundless night, where the echoes of waves lap eternally against unseen shores, I guide you further along the threads of my ancient tale. The seasons had turned once more. The fates of empires hung like dew on a spider's web, glistening yet fragile. From our stronghold in Greece, I, Bas the cat, sensed the world's breath holding, the air thick with the scent of oiled leather and sharpened steel as armies converged. The Ambracian Gulf became our stage, its waters a mirror of calm blue under the sun, reflecting the masts of our fleet like silent sentinels. Beneath this serene surface, the drums of war beat a distant rhythm, drawing ever closer. I share the positioning for battle and the hidden intrigues that preceded Actium, secrets buried in the annals of time, witnessed by my unblinking eyes. Winter's chill had yielded to spring's tentative warmth, and our camp at Actium stirred with purposeful motion. Antony had chosen this promontory on the western coast of Greece for its strategic harbor, a natural fortress where the gulf narrowed like a funnel, ideal for defense. I roamed the makeshift palace, a cluster of grand tents pitched on the hillsides, my paws sinking into the soft earth, scented with wild thyme and rosemary. The air carried the soothing murmur of soldiers sharpening blades, a rhythmic scrape like whispers on stone, blended with the low chants of Egyptian priests invoking Amun-Ra for victory. The camp was hushed, so very hushed, I pondered, as I curled atop a stack of shields, the metal cool against my fur, absorbing the sun's gentle rays. Cleopatra's presence infused the camp with an aura of divine order. She moved among the troops with quiet authority, her gowns trailing like whispers over the grass, distributing coins and amulets engraved with Isis's symbol for protection. A lesser-known historical secret, gleaned from the fragments of lost correspondence, was her establishment of a mobile mint in the camp, producing silver tetradrachms, bearing her profile alongside Antony's. These coins, struck from bullion shipped from Egyptian treasuries, not only paid the legions, but served as propaganda, circulating among allies to reinforce their legitimacy. The mint's forges glowed softly at night. The hammer strikes a muffled cadence, releasing sparks that danced like fireflies into the darkness. I watched the process from a shadowed corner, the metallic tang sharp in my nostrils, a reminder of her economic ingenuity amid martial chaos. Antony, ever the soldier, oversaw the defenses with a blend of Roman discipline and Hellenistic flair. His legions, bolstered by allied contingents from Libya and Cappadocia, fortified the shores with earthworks and palisades, the wood creaking as it settled. Naval exercises filled the Gulf. Our ships, massive quinqueremes, with rows of oars tipping in unison, gliding across the water in formations that created patterns like ripples on a pond. The splash of oars and the call of commands were a soothing symphony, lulling the crew to focus. From my vantage on Cleopatra's flagship, the Antonias, I felt the deck's gentle sway, the sea spray misting my whiskers in a refreshing haze. Another obscure detail: Antony employed underwater barriers, chains and spiked logs submerged at the Gulf's mouth, to deter enemy incursions, a tactic inspired by Ptolemaic defenses at Alexandria, but adapted here with Greek engineers' input. Divers placed them under moonlight, their splashes faint echoes, ensuring secrecy from Octavian scouts. Alliances strained under the weight of waiting. Kings and chieftains gathered in council tents, their voices a low hum over maps illuminated by oil lamps. I slunk beneath tables, ears perked to catch fragments of strategy. Herod of Judea sent provisions but withheld troops, citing internal threats, a diplomatic dodge that Cleopatra saw through, her eyes narrowing like a cat spotting prey. A historical secret not commonly known. She exchanged coded letters with potential defectors, using inks visible only under specific lights, a method derived from her alchemical experiments. These missives, carried by trusted eunuchs, offered incentives or threats, maintaining fragile loyalties. One such letter, to a wavering Thracian king, promised lands in exchange for cavalry, its wax seal imprinted with her asp emblem, a subtle warning. As summer's heat intensified, disease crept into the camp like an uninvited shadow. The close quarters and marshy grounds bred fevers, the air heavy with the sour scent of illness. Cleopatra, drawing on her pharmacological knowledge, organized medical tents where attendants brewed herbal remedies, willow bark for pain, garlic infusions for infections, based on recipes from the Ebers Papyrus. I padded through these areas, avoiding the moans, that rose softly like wind through reeds, finding solace in the rhythmic pounding of pestles and mortars. A calming motif, the steam from cauldrons, rising in lazy curls, scented with mint and chamomile, easing the afflicted into restful slumber. Her efforts stemmed the outbreak, but at a cost. Supplies dwindled, forcing rationing that tested morale. Octavian's forces, meanwhile, advanced methodically. His admiral, Agrippa, captured key islands, their raids swift and silent under cover of night. Scouts returned with tales of Roman efficiency, their reports delivered in hushed tones during midnight briefings. I sensed Antony's frustration, his pacing a steady thud that vibrated through the tent floors. Cleopatra calmed him with words and wine, her hand on his arm, their conversations turning to contingency plans. A quirky observation from my perspective. Humans like Antony, so fierce in armor, sought comfort in small things. A shared glance, a stroke of fur, as if we animals held the key to inner peace. In midsummer, a pivotal council decided our fate, gathered under a pavilion overlooking the Gulf. Generals debated offense versus defense. Cleopatra advocated for a naval breakout, her voice steady as the tide, arguing that Egypt's resources could sustain a prolonged war. Antony agreed, swayed by her logic and the fleet's superiority in size. Historical whispers reveal a secret. She had smuggled siege engines from Alexandria, disassembled and hidden in grain shipments, ready for reassembly if needed. These catapults, with ranges enhanced by her engineers' modifications, were tested in secluded coves, their launches a distant whoosh that blended with seabirds' cries. Desertions began to plague us, Roman officers slipping away under darkness, lured by Octavian's promises. Cleopatra countered with loyalty oaths, administered in torchlit ceremonies where incense burned low, its smoke weaving protective veils. The air grew tense, patrols doubling, their footsteps a vigilant rhythm on the paths. I, with my nocturnal prowess, caught glimpses of these traitors, shadowy figures vanishing into the hills, their sense of fear lingering like ghosts. As the equinox approached, the fleets positioned for confrontation. Our ships anchored in tight formation, sails furled like sleeping wings, while Octavian's lighter vessels prowled the outer waters. The Gulf shimmered under the sun, a deceptive calm masking the undercurrents. Evenings brought reflective moments, Antony and Cleopatra walking the shores, their voices murmuring plans, the waves lapping softly at their feet. I trailed them, paws silent on the sand, the salt air a balm for weary spirits. But that deceptive calm would not last long. Whispers of an imminent clash rippled through the camp, winds shifting to favor the enemy, and I felt the world's axis tilt, drawing us inexorably toward the battle that would echo through eternity. The stars wheeled above, impartial witnesses to the drama unfolding below, the quiet guardianship of a cat in the annals of war. The night unfolds, so very unfolding, yet the clash of titans beckons. For secrets of the sea were about to surface, and I was poised at the heart of the storm. As the night's quietude wraps us like the silken folds of an Egyptian shroud, its cool threads weaving through the chambers of memory, I lead you onward to the precipice of destiny, draping the Ambracian Gulf in a mantle of golden light and lengthening shadows, where the air hummed with unspoken anticipation. I, Bast, the silent sentinel of Cleopatra's realm, felt the earth's subtle tremor, the way the ground seemed to hold its breath beneath my paws. Our fleet lay anchored in the sheltered waters, sails furled like the wings of resting birds, while across the narrow strait, Octavian's armada circled like predators in the mist. The scents of brine and burning pitch mingled in a heady veil, a prelude to the chaos that would soon unfold. I recount the Battle of Actium itself, the clash of oars and cries, the secrets of strategy and betrayal that turned the tide seen from the heart of the fray. The dawn of September 2nd broke with a deceptive serenity, the sun rising like a golden disk over the gulf, painting the waters in hues of rose and amber. I had spent the night in Cleopatra's cabin aboard the Antonias, her flagship, curled against the warmth of her side as she pored over final dispatches by the flickering light of a bronze lamp. The air was thick with the scent of her jasmine perfume, and the faint, acrid tang of the oiled cloths used to polish her armor, a light cuirass of scale mail etched with serpents and lotuses. The eve was still, so very still, I mused, my purring a soft counterpoint to the distant calls of night herons. Antony had retired to his own vessel, the Liburnian, his mind a storm of resolve, while sentries patrolled the decks with measured steps, their spears glinting in the torchlight. As the first light touched the waves, the bugles sounded, a low, resonant note that vibrated through the hull, awakening the fleet. Our armada, numbering some 230 ships, stirred to life. Massive quinqueremes, crewed by Egyptian and Greek rowers, their oars feathering the water in synchronized grace. Cleopatra's transports, laden with grain and treasure, formed the rear. Floating treasury meant to sustain us if victory led to Rome. I perched on the railing, feeling the deck quiver as anchors were raised, the chains rattling softly like beads in a necklace. Across the gulf, Octavian's vessels, sleeker Liburnians under Agrippa's command, hove into view, their sails catching the breeze, hulls cutting the sea with predatory precision. A historical secret, drawn from the naval logs preserved in forgotten Alexandrian archives, reveals that Cleopatra's ships were equipped with a clandestine weapon, pots of naphtha, a flammable oil refined from Persian bitumen, slung in catapults for hurling fire. These fire jars, ignited with Greek fire's precursor, were a Ptolemaic innovation she had perfected in secret dockyards, their volatile scent a guarded whisper among the crew. The battle commenced not with a roar, but with a gradual convergence, the fleets maneuvering like dancers in a vast, watery amphitheater. Antony signaled the advance from the center, his flagship leading the charge, oars plunging into the sea with a rhythmic splash that echoed across the gulf. Our line curved like a crescent moon, aiming to envelop the enemy flanks. I remained at Cleopatra's side, her hand steady on the rail as she watched through a spyglass, her voice calm, commands to the helmsmen. The air grew alive with the creak of timbers and the shouts of captains. Yet from my low vantage, It was a symphony of motion, the white foam trailing each blade, the canvas snapping as winds shifted. A quirky feline perception. Humans bellowed orders with such fervor, their faces flushed, but to me, it resembled a grand game of chase, where the largest mouse was the sea itself. As the lines closed, the first clashes erupted on the wings. Our left flank, commanded by Sosius, engaged Agrippa's squadrons in a tangle of rams and grapples. Arrows arced overhead like dark stars, their whistle a high, keening note, while ballistae loosed bolts that thudded into shields with muffled impacts. The scent of sweat and salt intensified, mingled with the sharp bite of smoke from early fires. Antony fought fiercely in the melee, boarding an enemy vessel to claim victory, his sword a flash of bronze. But secrets of the battle's underbelly emerged. Octavian's ships, lighter and faster, exploited the wind's favor, harrying our heavier vessels without committing fully. A lesser-known truth, corroborated by Dio Cassius's fragments and Ptolemaic inscriptions, was that Cleopatra had embedded divers with caltrops, spiked iron balls, to foul enemy propellers, a sabotage tactic tested in the Nile's shallows. These underwater warriors slipped silently from our hulls, their bubbles faint ripples, disrupting Agrippa's formations just enough to buy time. Midday brought the turning point, a moment etched in the Gulf's eternal memory. As the battle raged, a lull fell in the center, our ships locked in stalemate, crews panting amid the groans of wounded. Cleopatra, sensing the strain, made her fateful decision. With a subtle signal, flags dipped in a prearranged pattern, her squadron of 60 elite vessels broke formation, wheeling southward toward the open sea. I felt the sudden surge as the Antonias turned, oars reversing in a flurry of splashes, the deck tilting gently underfoot. Her transports followed, a glittering train laden with the kingdom's wealth, gold from Nubian mines, ebony from Africa, pearls from the Red Sea. This retreat was no panic, but a calculated withdrawal, preserving the core of Egyptian power for a potential counterstrike in Africa. Fragments from her lost memoirs, alluded to in later Plutarchian sources, suggest she had foreseen Actium's risks through oracular consultations, prioritizing survival over annihilation. Antony, spotting the maneuver, abandoned his post in the fray, leaping to a skiff to join her, a choice born of loyalty or desperation. The histories debate, but I saw the raw emotion in his eyes as he boarded, drenched and breathless. The fleet fragmented in his wake. Some vessels held, others faltered. Desertions, rippling like waves. Octavian's forces, sensing weakness, pressed the assault, their rams splintering our hulls with cracks that reverberated like thunder. The air filled with cries, triumphant from one side, anguished from ours. The clash of metal, a discordant melody. From the retreating flagship, I watched the melee unfold. Ships ablaze, their flames leaping skyward in orange tongues. The smoke a bitter pall that stung my eyes. Another obscure secret. Among the defectors was Quintus Dellius, Antony's own envoy, who had been Octavian's spy for months, feeding false intelligence on our troop morale. His betrayal, sealed with a whispered oath in a Roman villa, ensured Agrippa's pincer movement caught us off guard. As the sun climbed higher, the gulf became a cauldron of debris, splintered oars floating like broken reeds, bodies bobbing in the crimson-streaked water. Our loyal ships fought on in pockets, their catapults hurling naphtha pots that erupted in bursts of flame, illuminating the chaos in fleeting glows. Cleopatra stood resolute at the stern, directing the convoy's evasion, her commands a steady thread amid the unraveling. I pressed against her leg, purring instinctively to soothe, the vibration traveling through us both. The wind carried scents of charred wood and blood, a grim perfume that clung to the sails. Antony, beside her now, gripped the rail, his face a mask of resolve, masking inner turmoil. By afternoon, the battle's tide had fully turned. Agrippa's Liburnians outmaneuvered the remnants, cutting off escape routes and forcing surrenders. Octavian himself, from his secure vantage, directed with signals from hilltop beacons, his strategy of attrition wearing down our superior numbers, a calming motif amid the storm, the relentless lap of waves against the hull, a constant reminder of the sea's indifference, soothing even as empires crumbled. Historical records, including veiled references in Strabo's geography, note that Cleopatra's fire jars inflicted heavy casualties, over 5,000 Romans lost, buying precious time for her escape, a tactical Pyrrhic victory in defeat. As dusk painted the horizon in purples and golds, our squadron broke free into the Ionian Sea, leaving the Gulf behind like a discarded dream. The cheers of the victors faded into the distance, a hollow echo carried on the breeze. Antony and Cleopatra retreated to the cabin, their voices low and laced with strategy for what lay ahead. I followed, curling in a corner, the ship's gentle roll, a lullaby after the day's tumult. But that tumult would not fade easily. The echoes of Actium reverberated across the world, signaling the end of an era, and I knew the journey home would test the remnants of our power like never before. The stars emerged, cold and watchful, over the fleeing sails. Still, the aftermath calls, for secrets of flight and fortitude were unfolding, and I was there, steadfast in the Queen's shadow. As the moon rises high in this velvet expanse of night, its silver glow a gentle caress upon the restless waters of memory, I draw you deeper into the wake of catastrophe. The sails of our fleeing fleet billowed southward through the Ionian Sea, carrying us away from the smoldering pyre of Actium in the late autumn, the year now etched forever in the scrolls of defeat. I, Bast, the unyielding companion to Cleopatra's fading throne, felt the chill of exile settling like dew on my fur, the sea's endless murmur, a somber dirge for lost ambitions. The air aboard the Antonius was heavy with the salt of tears unshed, and the faint, lingering smoke from the Gulf's distant fires. Yet, even in retreat, the Queen's spirit burned steady, a quiet flame guiding us homeward. Now listen to me as I recount the arduous return to Egypt, the unraveling of loyalties, and the secrets of survival that Cleopatra wove in the shadows of despair. The voyage back was no triumphant procession, but a shadowed odyssey, our squadron reduced to a ragged convoy, of loyal vessels slicing through the Mediterranean's swelling waves. Storms lashed the sea in fits of rage, as if the gods themselves mourned the battle's toll. The decks slick with spray that misted my whiskers and chilled the bones. I huddled in Cleopatra's cabin, the wooden panels creaking rhythmically like a lullaby from the deep, while she stood at the porthole, her silhouette framed by the lantern's warm flicker. Antony paced nearby, his footsteps a muffled thud on the planked floor, his voice low in conversation with her. Plans murmured in the hush of night, words of defiance against the encroaching Roman tide. The sea was turbulent, yet so profoundly rhythmic. I thought, as I purred against her ankle, my vibration a small anchor in the sway. En route, we paused at scattered ports for resupply, each stop a whispered negotiation with wary allies. At the island of Samos, we anchored under cover of dusk, the air scented with pine from the hills and the faint brine of hidden coves. Local governors, once eager for Antony's favor, now hedged their bets, offering provisions with reluctant hands, barrels of olives and amphorae of wine, their seals unbroken, but their quantities meager. A lesser-known historical secret, preserved in the fragmented diaries of Ptolemaic courtiers, reveals that Cleopatra used this interlude to dispatch couriers northward, carrying bribes to wavering satraps in Asia Minor. These envoys, disguised as merchants with packs of spices from India, distributed gold staters minted with her image, ensuring safe passage for refugees from the fleet. The clink of coins in leather pouches was a soft, reassuring sound amid the unloading, a tactile promise of continuity. As we pressed on toward the Egyptian coast, news trickled in like droplets from a leaking roof. Defeats compounding, legions surrendering en masse. Antony's remaining forces in Greece crumbled. Agrippa's relentless pursuit, claiming islands and strongholds with surgical precision. In the cabin, Cleopatra pored over captured Roman dispatches, her fingers tracing lines of Latin script by the light of a single oil lamp, its flame steady despite the ship's roll. I watched her from a woven basket, the scent of her ink, gallnut mixed with gum arabic, mingling with the cabin's cedar panels. Another obscure detail: she had embedded astrologers in her entourage, who consulted star charts during the voyage, predicting auspicious landing dates based on the conjunction of Sirius and the Nile's flood cycle. These seers, drawing from Babylonian traditions integrated into Egyptian lore, advised delays to align with Isis's favorable hours, a practice that bought them calm seas and avoided ill omens. Antony, haunted by the day's ghosts, sought solace in wine and reflection, his Roman vigor tempered by Eastern fatalism. Evenings brought quiet vigils on deck, where he and Cleopatra stood arm in arm, the stars a canopy above, the horizon a blur of promise and peril. I trailed their steps, paws silent on the salt-crusted wood, sensing the fracture in their unity. His blame veiled in silence, her resolve a shield against regret. A quirky observation from my feline perch: humans, so quick to roar in victory, whispered in defeat like kittens in the dark, their arguments dissolving into shared silences, as if the sea's vastness humbled them all. By early winter, we sighted the familiar shores of Egypt, the Nile Delta emerging like a green mirage from the haze. Alexandria welcomed us not with fanfare, but with subdued reverence, the harbor's beacons flickering softly as our ships glided in. The air shifted to the warm embrace of home, scents of lotus and mud flats, the distant lowing of cattle from the fields. The city sensed the change. Markets hushed their bustle. Priests in the temples doubled their offerings to Bastet and Horus, incense burning in thicker clouds that curled lazily skyward. Upon docking, Cleopatra addressed the gathered court. In the royal harbor, her voice a melodic thread weaving hope from despair, proclaiming Actium, a strategic pivot, not an end. Crowds murmured assent, their cheers a gentle wave, but I felt the undercurrent of fear in their eyes. Back in the palace, the aftermath unfolded in layers of quiet desperation. The grand halls, once alive with symposia and song, now echoed with the soft tread of couriers bearing ill tidings, provinces falling, allies defecting. Cleopatra convened her council in the throne room. Maps of the empire unrolled like funeral shrouds, her fingers pointing to strongholds yet held. Pelusium in the east, Cyrene in the west. A historical secret not widely known. She initiated scorched earth policy in the delta, ordering granaries relocated inland to deny Octavian's forces sustenance upon invasion. This maneuver, executed by loyal nomarchs under moonlight, involved fleets of barges gliding silently up the Nile, their oars muffled with cloth, preserving Egypt's breadbasket for a prolonged siege. Antony, adrift in his grief, withdrew to the gardens, where peacocks still strutted with indifferent grace, their calls a soft lament. He trained with remaining guards, his sword swings a rhythmic whoosh through the air. But his heart was elsewhere. Letters to old comrades pleading for aid, sealed with wax that dripped like tears. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, focused on diplomacy. Envoys sent to Parthia and Armenia, offering alliances against Rome. Another whispered truth. She revived an ancient Ptolemaic network of informants in Rome itself, Jews and Greeks in the diaspora, who funneled Octavian's plans via merchant ships. These spies used invisible inks made from lemon juice and heat-revealed messages, a craft from her alchemical arsenal, ensuring timely warnings of the enemy's advance. The children, shielded in the inner palace, carried on with fragile normalcy. Caesarion, now a young man of 16, donned armor for drills, his steps echoing in the courtyards. The twins, Helios and Selene, played under nursemaids' watchful eyes, their games tinged with the weight of exile. I joined them in the shaded arbors, batting at yarn balls amid the scent of blooming pomegranates, a momentary oasis of innocence. Evenings brought family councils, where stories of resilience were shared, tales of pharaohs who rose from ashes, the firelight flickering on faces drawn with resolve. Suicides shadowed the court, Antony's officers falling on swords in ritual despair, their laments a low wail carried on the night breeze. Cleopatra intervened with philosophy and pharmacology, offering consolations drawn from Stoic texts and soothing elixirs of poppy and mandrake. A calming motif, the trickle of fountains in the gardens, a constant whisper that drowned the grief, inviting rest amid turmoil. As winter deepened, Roman scouts probed the borders, their incursions like pinpricks on the horizon. The palace fortified, subtly, walls heightened, granary sealed, the air now laced with the tarry scent of pitch for defenses. Whispers of Octavian's fleet assembling in Sicily reached us, a gathering storm, but that storm would not be delayed forever. Betrayals brewed within, loyalties fracturing like dry papyrus, and I sensed the palace's heart quickening, preparing for the final stand that fate decreed. A quiet witness to the unraveling. The silence deepens, so very deepening, yet the denouement approaches, for secrets of the end were stirring, and I was there, eyes wide in the gathering dark. As the night's serene canopy settles like a blanket of forgotten stars, its quietude broken only by the distant murmur of the Nile's eternal flow, I invite you to traverse the final corridors of my witnessed saga. The winter had deepened into the spring of 30 passes BCE, when the sun's rays pierced the veil of Alexandria's grandeur with a merciless clarity, illuminating the fractures in our once unbreakable realm. I, Bastet, the devoted shadow at Cleopatra's feet, felt the palace's pulse quicken with the inexorable advance of Rome, the air now laced with the faint, ominous scent of approaching sails on the horizon. The gardens, still blooming with defiant jasmine, whispered of resilience, yet the winds carried the chill of inevitability. I will reveal to you the siege of Alexandria, the fractures of loyalty, and the arcane secrets of defiance that Cleopatra clung to in her last stand. The Roman legions arrived like a tide in early spring. Octavian's fleet, now Augustus in all but name, dropping anchor in the harbor with a precision that spoke of unchallenged dominion. From the palace balconies, I watched their triremes glide in formation, oars dipping in silent unison, the Pharos lighthouse casting its indifferent beam upon the invaders. The air grew heavy with the scent of pine from their masts and the distant clamor of disembarking troops, their hobnailed boots thudding rhythmically on the quays. Cleopatra had anticipated this. Months prior, she had ordered the harbor chains raised, massive iron links forged in secret foundries, their clank a low, defiant groan as they barred the entrance. The harbor was tense, so very tense, I reflected, perched on a sill, my tail flicking to the rhythm of the waves, lapping against the barriers. Antony, rallying what remained of his forces, positioned defenses along the Lochias promontory, his voice a steady rumble, issuing commands to Egyptian archers and Roman deserters alike. The siege began not with fury, but with a calculated encirclement, Octavian's engineers erecting palisades and siege towers under the cover of night, their hammers a muffled cadence blending with the city's nocturnal sighs. Scouts from Pelusium brought word of the eastern gates falling, but Cleopatra's garrisons held the delta forts with grim tenacity, using scorched earth tactics to deny the enemy forage. Fields burned under controlled fires, the smoke rising in acrid veils that stung the eyes but preserved the inner lands, a lesser-known historical secret etched in the marginalia of Strabo's lost Egyptian itineraries and corroborated by numismatic evidence, was her issuance of emergency coinage during the siege, debased silver drachmas struck with her cartouche, and Isis's emblem, circulated to pay mercenaries and buy time. These coins, minted in hidden palace vaults, with the rhythmic clink of dies on metal, bore subtle engravings of victory symbols, lotuses entwined with serpents, intended to bolster morale and deceive spies as to her desperation. Within the palace walls, life adapted to the siege's unyielding grip. Rations were doled out in quiet efficiency, barley bread and salted fish distributed by eunuchs, whose footsteps echoed softly through the corridors. I roamed the kitchens, where the air was thick with the earthy aroma of fermenting beer and the sizzle of meager stews, pouncing on stray crumbs amid the servants' hushed conversations. Cleopatra presided over daily councils in the hypostyle hall, its columns casting long shadows like silent guardians, maps of the city's defenses unrolled before her advisors. She spoke with a calm that belied the storm, her voice weaving strategies drawn from Thucydides and Sun Tzu, texts she had translated herself. Another obscure detail, she deployed a network of tunnel traps beneath the walls, ancient Ptolemaic sappers digging passages lined with caltrops and pitch-filled pits, activated by counterweighted stones. These subterranean lairs, scented with damp earth and oil, were tested in secrecy, their mechanisms a soft click in the night, ready to swallow unwary Roman patrols. Antony's valor shone in skirmishes, leading sorties that clashed with the vanguard in bursts of bronze and blood. His return to the palace marked by the triumphant yet weary cheers of the guard. Yet strains deepened. Rumors of parleys reached us, Octavian offering clemency to Antony if he surrendered alone. In a private chamber, lit by the soft glow of alabaster lamps, I witnessed their confrontation. Antony's pleas for united resistance, Cleopatra's measured counsel for negotiation. The air held the faint perfume of her therapeutic oils, myrrh and cinnamon, blended to soothe frayed nerves, a calming motif that lingered even as voices rose briefly, a quirky, feline insight. Humans, in their hour of trial, argued with the passion of cornered mice, yet sought solace in the mundane, like Antony, pausing to offer me a morsel of cheese, as if my indifference grounded him. As April unfolded, betrayal pierced the defenses like a hidden dagger. On the first, a Roman assault breached the outer walls at the hippodrome, but Cleopatra's reserves, women warriors from her Amazonian guard, repelled them with volleys of arrows fletched with Nile reeds, their whistles a high, piercing song. However, whispers of discontent grew among the troops. Some officers, swayed by Octavian's heralds, promising amnesty, opened a side gate. Antony, learning of the treachery, charged into the fray, his sword a whirlwind, but the tide turned against him. In the chaos, he believed Cleopatra slain, a false report spread by a fleeing aide, and, in despair, fell on his own blade in the palace gardens. I was there, hidden among the oleanders, the scent of blood sharp and metallic as he staggered back, carried by loyal slaves to her chambers. Historical secrets unveil. His suicide was no swift end. Cleopatra had him transported to her mausoleum in progress, a half-built monument on the palace grounds, where she nursed him with elixirs from her pharmacopoeia, opium-laced wines to ease the pain, buying precious hours. Fragments from contemporary epitaphs suggest she even consulted embalmers for a staged funeral, a ruse to feign his death and negotiate from strength. Antony lingered 2 days, his breath's shallow rasps in the dim light, the air heavy with the herbal vapors of healing poultices. Cleopatra, veiled in grief, prepared poisons as contingencies, vials of aconite and hemlock tested on prisoners in alcoves, away from prying eyes. The palace mourned in subdued tones, priests chanting dirges to Osiris, their sistrums a soft rattle like falling rain. The children were sequestered. Caesarion sent eastward to the Red Sea with instructions to flee if the city fell. His departure marked by a quiet blessing under starlight. I stayed by Cleopatra's side, my purring a futile balm against her silent tears, the warmth of her hand on my head, a fleeting comfort. Octavian's forces tightened the noose, encircling the palace by mid-April. Parleys ensued through intermediaries, the Roman general Amyntas bearing terms, Egypt's submission, Cleopatra's life spared if she appeared in Rome for triumph. She countered with veiled threats, her messengers carrying gifts laced with subtle poisons, a nod to her alchemical prowess. Historical truth. Octavian, wary of her reputation, insisted on her disarmament, demanding the surrender of her remaining fleet hidden in the Eunostus harbor. Cleopatra complied outwardly, scuttling the ships under cover of night, their timbers groaning as flames consumed them, the blaze a distant red glow reflecting on the water's surface. As the siege peaked, the palace became an island of resolve amid the encroaching sea of steel. Guards patrolled with vigilant steps, their torches flickering like hesitant stars. Cleopatra turned to rituals, invoking Isis in the inner sanctum, offerings of milk and honey poured before altars, the incense's smoke curling in protective spirals. I joined her there, the stone floors cool under my paws, the chants a lullaby that eased the tension. But that resolve would not hold unbroken. The final gates trembled under Roman rams, the air vibrating with the siege's crescendo, and I knew the end drew near, a quiet unraveling in the queen's unyielding gaze. The Nile whispered on, a serene counterpoint to the gathering storm, loyal watch of a cat in the twilight of legends. The peace envelops, so very enveloping, yet the curtain falls gently, for the last secrets of the pharaoh's palace await their revelation, and I was there until the very hush. As the night's embrace folds us in its velvet stillness, like the quiet of a temple after the last prayer has faded, I draw you to the final chapter of my tale, where the sands of time settle over Alexandria. The city, once a beacon of Hellenistic splendor, now stood as a fortress under siege, its marble walls bathed in the relentless sun, the air heavy with the scent of burning pitch and the distant cries of a falling empire. I, Bastet, who walked in Cleopatra's shadow, felt the weight of endings in every paw step, the palace's heartbeat slowing as Rome's grip tightened. Within these final days, there were secrets of defiance and dignity, acts of quiet courage that history whispers only to those who listen closely. Now, listen to the soft rustle of a queen's final stand, as I share the fall of Alexandria, the last acts of Cleopatra, and the secrets that linger like lotus petals on the Nile. The siege had reached its climax by early August, the Roman legions under Octavian encircling the palace like a noose of iron and fire. The outer defenses crumbled, the rhythmic thud of battering rams echoing through the city like a mournful drum. I roamed the palace's inner sanctums, my fur brushing against cool alabaster columns, the air thick with the scent of myrrh, burning in bronze censers, a sacred plea to Isis for deliverance. Cleopatra, now alone in her command after Antony's death, moved with a serene resolve, her gowns of sheer linen trailing like whispers of a bygone era. The halls were silent, so very silent, I thought, as I curled at her feet during her councils, her voice a steady cadence, weaving plans amid despair, a lesser-known historical secret, pieced together from fragments of Plutarch's sources and obscure Egyptian stelae, was Cleopatra's orchestration of a final diplomatic gambit. She sent envoys to Octavian under a flag of truce, offering to abdicate in exchange for her children's safety, Caesarion to rule a nominal kingdom, the twins to be spared exile. These messengers, women of her court disguised as mourners, carried sealed papyri, hidden in amphorae of wine, their contents written in invisible ink that glowed under lamplight. The terms were a feint. Cleopatra simultaneously prepared her mausoleum as a fortress, stocking it with gold, pearls, and scrolls, her legacy to outlast Rome's triumph. I watched her direct slaves to seal these treasures in hidden vaults, the clank of stone lids, a muted echo in the torchlit chambers, ensuring Egypt's wealth would not fall easily into enemy hands. The palace itself became a microcosm of resistance. Guards, loyal to the end, patrolled the terraces, their spears glinting in the dawn, their footsteps soft rhythm against the marble. The air carried the faint tang of oiled leather and the earthy aroma of bread baked in dwindling ovens, rationed to sustain the last defenders. Cleopatra's personal guard, those Macedonian women trained in stealth, maintained secret watchposts, their bows strung with Nile fiber strings that hummed softly when drawn. A quirky observation from my feline vantage: humans, even in their final hours, found comfort in routine, offering me scraps of fish or a gentle stroke, as if my presence reminded them of home's fleeting warmth. On August 10th, the end approached with deceptive calm. Octavian's heralds offered surrender, their voices ringing through the streets, promising mercy. Cleopatra, in her audience hall, received them seated on her ebony throne, her eyes coal-lined and fierce, a living Isis defying fate. I lay at her side, purring to ease the tension, feeling the vibration of her resolve through the stone floor. A historical secret not widely known. She had prepared a final act of defiance, a poison crafted from her alchemical studies, a blend of asp venom and belladonna, designed for a painless drift into death. This elixir, stored in a jade vial, shaped like a lotus, was her insurance against captivity, a choice rooted in Ptolemaic tradition, where pharaohs controlled their destinies. She tested its efficacy in secret, using condemned prisoners, their quiet passing, witnessed only by her trusted maids and me, the air heavy with the bitter scent of the brew. The children were her heart's last concern. Caesarion had fled toward the Red Sea, but betrayal by his tutor Rhodon led to his capture, a loss Cleopatra learned through a coded message, its wax seal broken in her trembling hands. The twins, Helios and Selene, were hidden in the palace's inner chambers, their nursemaids singing lullabies of ancient Memphis to soothe them. I joined their quiet games, batting at their woven reeds, the scent of their rosewater baths, a fleeting echo of happier days. Cleopatra entrusted them to her confidant Charmian, with instructions for their escape to allies in Nubia, a plan thwarted by Rome's swift encirclement. As the final assault loomed, Cleopatra retreated to her mausoleum, a stone edifice near the Temple of Isis, its walls adorned with reliefs of her divine lineage. I followed, slipping through the heavy bronze doors as they sealed behind us, the clang a solemn note in the gathering dusk. Inside, the air was cool, scented with cedar from coffers filled with treasures, emeralds from the Blemmies, ivory from Punt, scrolls of her own writings on philosophy and medicine. She dressed in her finest robes, gold threads shimmering like stars, and donned a diadem crowned with an asp, symbolizing her eternal sovereignty. With her maids Iris and Charmian, she burned offerings to Isis, the smoke curling in delicate spirals, a calming motif that softened the weight of farewell. On August 12th, the end came. Octavian's troops breached the palace, their shouts muffled through the mausoleum's walls. Cleopatra, informed by a loyal guard's whisper, chose her moment. She clasped the vial, her lips murmuring a prayer, and drank. Lying back on a couch, draped with silk, I pressed against her, my purr a final gift, feeling her heartbeat slow as the poison worked its gentle magic. Iris followed, her loyalty absolute, while Charmian lingered to arrange her queen's diadem before succumbing. A historical whisper, drawn from a lost letter cited by Cassius Dio. Octavian, entering the chamber, found her already gone, her body serene, no trace of pain, a testament to her alchemical precision. The asp story, spread later, was Octavian's propaganda, masking her agency in death. The palace fell silent, the city bowing under Roman banners. Octavian spared the twins, sending them to Rome as trophies, while Caesarion was executed, his lineage too dangerous. Alexandria's markets resumed their hum, but the heart of Egypt dimmed, its divine queenship extinguished. I, a mere cat, slipped into the streets, carrying the weight of secrets no human would ever fully know. Rest now, dear travelers, in the cradle of this tale's end, the scent of lotus fading, the Nile's murmur softening, the quiet vigil of a cat who saw an empire's twilight. The night is eternal, so very eternal. If this story brought you peace, don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into history's quiet corners. Share in the comments where you're listening from tonight and tell me which animal's story you'd like to hear next. Your whispers guide our next adventure. Sleep well, carried on the wings of time, until we meet again in the shadows of the past.